Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you. As Francois said earlier, we had stakeholder sessions held throughout Wales, but we felt we needed perhaps a little bit more impact and knowledge on the compliance and performance. So we met up with a number of organisations: local authority, building control, approved inspectors, housing developers, major building contractors, warranty providers. We held up some briefing sessions with manufacturers also to try and get a background really as to where the existing problems were with compliance and perhaps how we can support better compliance with the new changes. As I say, we involved BRACU along the line as well because ultimately they are advisory body. So the questions we asked went to the juggler, I suppose, for the first one. Does everyone find Part L complicated and difficult to understand? Skeptics would say, where have you been since 2002? How guidance can be improved? Consequences of poor construction? Will a standard checklist improve compliance? And a skills gap. Obviously with new requirements, will this create a skills gap? And manufacturers, because data they provide is important to show compliance and also with supplier materials. So the feedback highlighted one of the things I think which David's brought into his presentation today. 2006 elemental approach, certainly for the small domestic builders, and they seem to be our area where he's most concerned. The elemental approach was seen as an ideal area for these people to perhaps get back to speed, where in the previous days of 2006, I remember if you went on site, gave them a wall construction, floor construction, roof construction, the small SMEs would be away and there wouldn't be any problems, so, certainly not as far as what we've got today. So we've taken that on board. Simplification of the approved documents. Although the guidance is there, people thought that perhaps the language was wrong, difficult to understand. So we've looked at that. How buildings are performing in practice, and I know we've had one comment from the floor today already. That's an ongoing thing that we need to look at in the future, and certainly more work to be done on that. And the need for sufficient time between the introduction of the regulations and the regulations coming into force. And again, Francois has touched on that already today. So I think the biggest thing that came out of the our interviews and our questionnaires was the SMEs, and certainly in Wales, a number of building work, 10,000 extensions are undertaken. We were told that in Wales, and alteration works. The SMEs seem to find these new requirements, any change really, hard to follow. And so we thought, how can we disseminate these down to these hard-to-reach areas? It's again come back certainly from all areas. SMEs don't have the expertise available. A lot of them are small, 1, 2, 5-man bands. They haven't got time to attend functions like this today. Unlike the larger developers who have the expertise to undertake perhaps the more difficult things like guidance, SAP calculations, how to change a design, that type of thing. And there's a lot of dependence on the building control bodies to pass down the information. I think that's come across the board. I think that's historical, that to get this information passed down, the small bodies don't find much help. They may have an architect to do the design, but the design can quite often change. Insulation qualities change. So again, the building control bodies are seen as the area where they can get the guidance. And work is becoming more challenging. Certainly floor, window detailing, the thermal bridging. We've had Colin King from the BRE undertaking work on the RSLs. He's been taking toolbox sessions, showing the people how to undertake these details. And again, they find it hard to take on board because these are difficult. Perhaps easy on the drawing board, but when it comes to construct them, perhaps a lot different. One of the other interesting facts that came out as well was supply materials. Builders would go to the builder's merchant, ask for insulation. That's all they've got is a U value. So A lot of the times they get given the insulation, usually on cost, because I suppose it's human nature. The insulation would get installed or checked by building control. The insulation would be wrong. What they've gone is for cost, not knowing what the U value meant in some instances, and that's one of the things that come out with small builders. They need to be told exactly what they need to do, and products, a lintel's a lintel, an insulation board's an insulation board. One of the things that came out of the non-domestic side was clients and funding bodies do not understand the design constraints, certainly with SBEM. They're more concerned with how the aesthetics of the building look and the letting viability rather than how the building performs. And there's very little interest in carbon compliance and knowing how that works. There was also concerns in relation to the SBEM and some designs starting off, although there's supposed to be a design SBEM up front, many design and build contractors were chasing their tails all the time because it wasn't actually complete, and they were finding that they're updating it all the way along and making sure that they comply, but rather than have everything done up front, which on some large projects you can understand. But it's a chasing your tail problem, and it seems the same with SAP as well. With SAP calculations, sometimes a design SAP would be undertaken. When it comes to site, changes are undertaken, but not always fed back to the assessor. Ultimately, the SAP calculation is not what's been undertaken on site. So, one of the things we've considered is a checklist. Is a checklist going to be an advantage to members on site? Will they can sign off areas? Will that be an advantage? There's been a mixed response. Some building control bodies already have a checklist. Energy assessors provide checklists so they can fill in and send back. But having felt the problems we have on site, sign off and updating probably is an area of concern, certainly when you look at some SBEM calculations and some SAP calculations, whether we can introduce that to perhaps, we won't get 100% maybe, but can we improve the situation? Can we improve the situation with compliance? One of the biggest areas we've looked at is reformatting the approved document, and we looked at and we've picked out L1B. We've totally reformatted L1B, and I hope you've all had a chance to have a look. We've tried to make the language simpler. We tried to make it more understandable for perhaps your small SMEs who like to find out and get knowledge on it. We've also formatted it so it runs perhaps through the jobs. There'll be extensions, alterations, change of use, and there's a flow chart as well. So the flow chart should guide you to each area, and it shows in each area what compliance you need to comply with, rather than with the old L1B. You'd have to jump back and forth. So we'd like you to have a look at that, and please make your comments. Any amendments you think that are needed as well, we'd certainly recommend you to make your comments on the response form. We also intend to work with manufacturers, obviously with the recipe approach and with extensions as well. We're trying to get the manufacturers on board to give us some compliant details so that, going back to SMEs again, if they know what they have to build to, in the building regs it will say U value, but in some instances U value doesn't mean an awful lot to the small SMEs. So we will try and work with the manufacturers to try and get them on board to provide us with some compliant constructions. Again, we're not going to improve everything 100%, but we hope that we will be able to perhaps assist with the small to medium builders. Also with the recipe approach as well, if they know exactly what they need to do with regards to U values, give them a recipe approach, give them the U values. We know that the SMEs are repetitive in nature. Generally they like to know what complies, and when it does comply, they're away and they're all dealt with. Education and support. With the changes to the regulations, the presentations you see here today are going to be changed so that they'll be available to organisations, so that they can feed them back down to their customers and clients. So, you know, you can pass on the message, we will provide the information, you can pass on the message. Hopefully that will drill down as far as we can get, and we realise that the small SMEs are going to be problem areas. So that includes going in to do toolbox sessions, perhaps breakfast sessions with the small SMEs, with builders, merchants, if we can get that arrangement. And we've already talked to some organisations to do that. We have our input to make sure we get the feedback. But we feel that if we can do that, spread the word, drill down as far as we can. We need to engage with the smaller builders because the complexity of the regulations obviously is causing a problem, certainly with interpretation. We hope to do something with giving some information as well to clients and funding bodies on the Part L requirements, because we want to spread the word, we want more compliance. If it means providing something for clients, some information on carbon compliance, we're going to try and look at that and see if we can introduce that as well. We also need, one of the parts we did on the questionnaires as well was the skills factors, and I don't think it's just in the building control. There's certainly skill factors with trades, so we will be talking to the skills councils, university, colleges and other agencies to try if we can see if we can increase the education, try and increase the skills. It's not going to be an overnight problem, we realise that, but we've only just inherited the building regulations. We're not going to improve things overnight either, but it's an incentive to try and improve compliance as far as we can. Research and development, again, we talked about that earlier with regards to data collection, the shortfall between design and compliance. Those of you who've seen the report by Leeds Metropolitan on the studies in York can see where there have been shortfalls. A lot of them are communication. I know in one instance that feedback on the windows, feedback on the timber involvement in the construction made a major shortfall in the carbon compliance of the building. So it's not all about compliance with regulations, it's about the communication factor, making sure what gets done on site gets fed back to the assessor to make sure that you have as near as compliance as we possibly can get. We'll engage with CLG as well over quality insurance. I don't know whether you're familiar with the consultation that the CLG had. They're looking at a PAS compliance, publicly available specification. Similar to, it could perhaps come from our checklist, whether we can look forward, whether we can improve compliance by introducing that type of thing where you deal with the building from the initial start right through the handover, and maybe testing following on after that as part of a specification to aid compliance and making sure that we get further reports back on data. We'd already conducted studies on our RSL Code 4 and Code 5 homes. Colin King from the Building Research Establishment has been commissioned to do technical studies on that. Also, the Welsh School of Architecture are undertaking monitoring on those sites. So we are starting to get feedback, and hopefully that work will take us forward. And as I say, we will also compare that data with other administrations in England, Scotland, Northern Ireland. So hopefully we get some further advice on that. Going into the building control system, there's one part in the consultation doc in regards to consequential improvements. We realise that will have a slight impact on building control because they will have to agree that consequential, an additional duty as such. So we'd be interested on the feedback from building control bodies on that particular question. And you're most probably aware that the CLG are undertaking quite an extensive look at the building control system. We don't know what will come out of that at the moment. The consultation document and the results of that haven't come out, but it'll be part of our work for future, and certainly through the Building Regulation Advisory Committee, it's something that we will be looking at to see if we can improve the system, see if we can improve compliance in some way. So, any questions?
Any questions for Colin?
Quiet.
No questions. Right. Right. We've come to the end of today's presentations. So, by way of short summing up, firstly, again, I'd like to thank you all for attending. We've tried to give presentations, we've tried to give the background behind the thinking that's gone into these proposals for one main purpose, really. It's interesting to get the questions back, and we're taking a record of all the questions and the answers that were given. And I think Colin mentioned that information will be up under the Constructing Excellence Wales events page as soon as we can get it. As will be, you may have noticed that we've been videoing the presentations. So we hope to get videos we're only videoing the Cardiff event, but when we go to Carmarthen tomorrow and Llandudno next week, essentially we'll be giving the same presentation, different questions maybe, but the same presentation. So we'll be uploading that so that you know, there's a record of the discussion that took place, but also if you want to refer back to the presentations through the videos that will be there. Consultation ends on October the 23rd, and I encourage you and hope that you will all respond. And as I say, that today has helped you with some of the issues that you might some of the points you might want to make. In the consultation document, there is a questionnaire. We've run through today the actual questions in there and tried to talk a bit about those. But you know, if you can use that pro forma, we're happy to take any form of written comments. But we've tried in those questions to bring out what the key issues would be, the key questions would be for us in finalising and formulating our policy. So, as I say, coffee is ready, or just about ready. Coffee's ready. So I'd just like to thank you and wish you a safe journey home, and thank you for attending.